A beguiling woman develops an unhealthy and dangerous obsession with her happily married neighbor and will stop at nothing to have him all to herself. One morning, married couple Joy and Greg drive around their new neighborhood and she marvels at how spacious it is. When the woman sees a man waving as they pass by, she asks her husband about it. So he says people are friendly in the South. Eventually, they arrive at their new house and Joy admires its beauty. Then, she commends her spouse for doing a great job picking the home. Greg tells his wife that he's already set up some furniture inside and that she should go ahead while he grabs their luggage. Inside, the woman wanders through the living room and kitchen before taking a seat on the couch. When her husband enters, she expresses how much she loves their new house. While the couple shares a kiss, they hear the doorbell ring and they meet their new neighbors, Wilma, George, Keisha, and Brandon, who come bearing housewarming gifts. When the group asks where they're originally from, Joy says they just moved from LA. Then, Greg wonders if the neighbors would like to come inside to talk for a bit, but George politely declines since they might need the time to unpack and rest. Moments later, the doorbell rings again and the husband meets another neighbor, Becky, who apologizes for forgetting the housewarming gift. Eventually, Joy appears and introduces herself to the woman who says they should come over for dinner sometime. After Becky leaves, the wife teases Greg for how much he was smiling while talking to the beautiful neighbor. During dinner, the man asks Joy if she's nervous about her first day at her new job tomorrow, and she admits suddenly working in a different field after 10 years in marketing is making her anxious. So the husband says it's okay to feel nervous and adds that she deserved the executive position. The next day, Greg goes on his morning jog and runs into Becky at the park. She asks if he's a runner too, so the man explains that he mostly does it to keep in shape, especially since he has to take a physical agility test for the police academy. When he asks the woman why she runs, she says her therapist advised her to do it. In case Greg took her therapy comment the wrong way, Becky clarifies that she isn't crazy, and he assures her that he understands some people just need someone to talk to. She appreciates his thoughtful words and points out that, unlike him, she isn't blessed with a significant other whom she can talk to about her problems. To finish off their run, Becky challenges Greg to a playful race back to their street, and he accepts. Later, as Joy prepares for work, she peeks through the blinds and sees her husband and blonde neighbor having a pleasant conversation in front of the house. Then, she watches Becky flirtily touch the man's arm, so she walks away from the window. After Greg returns inside the house, the wife teases that he'll ace the conditioning test now that he found a running partner. To reassure Joy, the man says the neighbor was already at the park when he got there and that he only has eyes for her. When his wife's at work, the man washes the car in the driveway and waves back at Becky when she emerges from her house. That afternoon, Joy arrives from work, so her husband asks how her first day went. The woman says it was tiring, but she's glad she has a staff full of eager recent college graduates who want to learn from her. Then, she says she's going on a work trip later this week because the company is flying her to Atlanta to speak to potential clients. Greg shares that he's scheduled to take the agility test on Friday, and if he passes, he'll take the written test right after. On Friday, the man walks to his car and sees the neighbor running past. She wonders why he didn't go on his usual jog this morning, so he explains that he has to take his agility test, and she wishes him luck. At the police academy, Sergeant Armstrong conducts the agility test and tells the cadets that they need to run 1.5 miles under 15 minutes to make it to the next round. Greg completes the run with time to spare, but he sees his fellow cadet, Sanders, seemingly unable to finish the last 100 feet, so he encourages the man to dig deep and find the motivation to sprint to the finish line. Thanks to Greg's inspiring words, Sanders manages to complete the run with a second left. Later, Sergeant Armstrong commends the man for what he did for his fellow cadet earlier and says the force needs men like him. Then, the officer says he'll conduct a background check by calling his past employers and talking to his neighbors. Meanwhile, Becky texts Joy to ask if she wants to hang out after work, but the latter responds that she can't because she has to pack for a work trip. One night, while his wife's away on business, Greg invites Brandon over to watch a game. Minutes later, Becky drops by and says she was hoping to speak to Joy, but the man says his wife isn't home. Then, he tells the woman that he passed his fitness exam, and she says she never doubted him. When he returns to the living room, Brandon teases that it seems like the blonde stopped by the house for Greg even though she claimed she was looking for Joy. Bemused, the man says he isn't looking to have marital problems by entertaining those thoughts. He asks the man how long Becky's been in the neighborhood, and the latter says she moved in a few months before they did. Suddenly, Brandon shares that the flirty woman tried to make a pass at him once or twice, but he deflected her advances by acting densely. He adds that he's surprised she hasn't made a move on Greg yet, since she has a reputation of going after black men. After a successful meeting with a client, the elated Joy calls her husband who's mowing the lawn. When she asks if he's been behaving while alone in the house, the man gets momentarily distracted by Becky waving at him. Then, he playfully jokes that he had a friendly neighbor over last night, and when the wife thinks it's the blonde, Greg clarifies that it was Brandon. Noting the serious tone in Joy's voice, the man assures her that she has nothing to worry about regarding his loyalty as a husband. That evening, while he reads a book on the couch, he receives a raunchy text from his wife and he responds accordingly. Later, Greg heads outside and sees Becky smoking a spliff on her driveway. She teases that the aspiring cop might arrest her, so he says he won't if she shares the illicit substance. Meanwhile, the nosy Keisha sees the interaction from her window and her husband joins in. Eventually, Greg asks Becky if she dates black men, and his question amuses her. She wonders how he made the assumption, so he explains that she seems comfortable around people like him, unlike most white people he interacts with. Then, the woman takes the man's beer bottle and takes a swig. In the house across the street, Brandon tells his wife that the two are probably just talking, but she has her doubts. When Greg asks about an empty house on their street, the woman says the family who used to live there moved out weeks ago. Then she mentions how they had a pool and says they should go check it out. Despite his initial hesitation, the man follows Becky to the pool and she turns the lights on. Suddenly, the woman undresses down to her undergarments and jumps into the water. Greg refuses to get in, so she pretends to drown, forcing him to save her. Becky laughs and reveals that she wasn't in any danger, but she thanks the man by kissing his cheek. Surprised, Greg annoyedly pushes her away, climbs out of the pool, and returns to the house. During her next therapy session with Dr. Robinson, the blonde lies about being 1 year sober since she drank alcohol last night. When the therapist asks what she does about her triggers, the woman says she goes into a safe space in her mind and thinks positive thoughts. Dr. Robinson asks if she's dating anyone, so the patient shares that she met a great guy recently. The therapist wonders how they met, so Becky says the man saved her from drowning in a neighbor's pool and believes it was fate. When the doctor tells her to take things slow since she tends to run off on a feeling, the blonde insists it's not what she's doing. Soon, Joy arrives from the work trip and Becky welcomes her back. After hearing about the successful meetings, the neighbor says they should grab a coffee to celebrate, but the woman says she has a severe caffeine allergy. Joy adds that she just wants to relax and cuddle with her husband, so the blonde says they should come over for dinner tomorrow night because she still owes the couple a housewarming gift. Inside the house, Greg prepares a romantic dinner for his wife and hands her a bouquet of roses as she walks in the door. Before enjoying the meal, the man gives Joy a diamond bracelet, which she appreciates. Later, the couple takes a bath in the tub, and the woman tells her husband that Becky invited them over for dinner tomorrow night. He expresses that he doesn't want to go because he'd rather spend the following days with his wife, but Joy says the neighbor won't take no for an answer. The next evening, the blonde welcomes the guests while wearing a fancy red dress. After giving the woman a quick hug, she wraps her arms around the man in a lingering embrace, prompting him to politely push her off. During the meal, Joy compliments the host's cooking, and she says her high school boyfriend's mother taught her. Then, the female guest asks Becky what she does for a living, so the blonde shares that after her husband died from a hiking accident, she's just been living off the money he left her. Joy apologizes for bringing it up because she didn't know she was a widow, so the host assures her that it's alright. While his wife gradually softens up toward the neighbor, Greg sulks in his chair, worried the incident at the pool might come to light. When Joy excuses herself to the bathroom, the host asks the man why he's been quiet the entire evening, so he says he thought they'd keep their distance after what happened at the pool. Becky explains that she promised promise to cook them dinner and promises to keep their rendezvous a secret. Annoyed, Greg rises to his feet and states that he didn't mean to mislead the neighbor in any way, and emphasizes that he loves his wife too much to betray her. However, the blonde has a warped version of the events and says he couldn't keep his hands off her while they were in the pool. Suddenly, Joy returns from the bathroom and thanks the host for the lovely meal. After the couple leaves, Becky imagines doing the deed with Greg in the pool. Later that night, the husband and wife make love in the bedroom. The next day, the man finds the blonde cooking breakfast in their kitchen, so he sternly orders her to leave. When she brings up the incident at the pool again, Greg explains that it was a mistake and apologizes for letting it get that far. Then, he calmly asks the neighbor to stay away from him and his wife, but she says she can't do that since she and Joy have become good friends. Furious, Greg grabs Becky's arm and demands that she stay away. The blonde shakes her arm free and storms out of the house. During the next session, Dr. Robinson notes how the patient's demeanor is drastically different from how optimistic she was the last time they met. The therapist thinks they need to deal with her trauma from her parents abandoning her as a child. However, the blonde opens up about her relationship problems, surprising the doctor when she reveals that the new man in her life has a wife. She reasons that it isn't an affair because they're both in love and she just needs to get rid of his wife. Concerned, Dr. Robinson makes sure that the patient means she's hoping the man divorces his wife, and Becky half-heartedly agrees. Sensing the suspicion coming from the therapist, the blonde excuses herself to the bathroom. Moments later, the deranged woman pops out from behind the doctor and strangles her with a scarf, ending her life. After the despicable act, Becky ties the scarf to her hair and she takes Dr. Robinson's notebook. That afternoon, Sergeant Armstrong drops by the blonde's house for an interview as part of Greg's background check. When the woman sees the aspiring police officer in his driveway, she asks the cop if they can move the conversation indoors. In the living room, Becky mentions how she had the couple over for dinner recently, but instead of recounting what happened, she makes up a story. The blonde claims that Greg made a move on her when his wife was in the bathroom and told her that he didn't want their relationship to end. Sergeant Armstrong asks if they're having an affair, and the woman says they did the deed once after having too much to drink. Becky adds that Greg grabbed her arm and wouldn't let go until she promised she would see him again. Then, the blonde asks if her statement's gonna cost the aspiring cop a spot in the academy, and Sergeant Armstrong says the police department has a standard that they need to uphold. Later, Greg waves at the officer's passing car, and the older man points out that his entanglement with his next-door neighbor as a married man doesn't display the proper judgment the police department seeks in a candidate. The man tries to explain his side of the story, but Sergeant Armstrong warns that if he ever lays his hands on Becky again, he'll arrest the cadet himself. The next day, the blonde talks to Wilma, who disdainfully implies that she's heard the stories going around the neighborhood. The older woman says Greg and Joy are good people and expresses that she doesn't like all the drama that's been happening in the community ever since Becky moved in. So the blonde tells Wilma to mind her own business if she doesn't want something unfortunate to happen to her and George. Later, Greg confronts the woman for what she said to Sergeant Armstrong. At first, she feigns ignorance, but when the man says she's messing with his life, the delusional neighbor assures him he won't have to work once they're together because she has a lot of money. Furious, the aspiring cop calls her crazy for assuming that he'd ever leave his wife for her. Suddenly, Joy arrives, so the pair pretends as though they're having a normal conversation. Before walking away, the man tells Becky to leave him alone because they'll never be together. That night, the blonde sneaks into the couple's house and sprinkles the contents of a caffeine capsule into Joy's water bottle. Meanwhile, Keisha sees the suspicious woman running away from their neighbor's house, but the blonde notices her peeking through the blinds. The next day, Joy suffers an allergic reaction after taking a drink from her water bottle. Later at the hospital, the doctor informs Greg that lab tests confirmed a high amount of caffeine in his wife's system. Confused, the man says Joy takes her allergy seriously and would never mistakenly ingest the substance. That night, Becky sneaks into Keisha and Brandon's house and turns the knobs on their gas stove. The next evening, the authorities arrive outside the couple's house, and when Greg asks Wilma and George what happened, they relay that the neighbors passed away last last night from carbon monoxide poisoning. After hearing the unfortunate news, the man spots the blonde backing away into the shadows. Later that night, Greg answers a call from Becky, who says she believes they're in love. When he responds that she has the wrong number, the deranged woman threatens to harm his wife if he doesn't leave her. While the couple sleeps, the unhinged neighbor breaks into their house and stands by the bed. The next day, the husband suggests that his wife take the day off from work so they can relax and explore the city. Later, Becky sees the couple drive away, so she sneaks into the house and takes a bath in their tub. After drying off, the woman puts on one of Greg's shirts and lays on the bed. That evening, the couple returns to find their living room completely trashed, so Greg calls the police. After the cops leave, the man says Becky was responsible, and when the wife asks why, he finally reveals what happened while she was on the work trip. He admits that they had a drink and the woman tried to kiss him. However, Joy has a hard time believing that nothing else happened, and admonishes him for only telling her about it because the blonde trashed the house. Furious, Joy storms off to their neighbor's house to confront her. To their surprise, the front door's unlocked but the lights don't work. Upstairs, the horrified couple finds Wilma's and George's lifeless bodies. Then, Becky emerges from the bedroom and knocks Greg out with a baseball bat. When Joy asks the deranged blonde why she killed their neighbors, the latter says they were sticking their noses in her business, and the former deduces that she was also responsible for Keisha and Brandon's deaths. Eventually, a scuffle ensues and Joy straddles the killer and punches her several times. However, Becky knocks her off, but as the woman's about to hit her with a bat, she kicks her in the midsection. Joy challenges the blonde to a fistfight, and her powerful swing causes the murderer to fall onto a glass table. As she tries to strangle Becky, the latter hits her on the head with a vase. Just as the blonde's about to deliver the final blow, Joy grabs a glass shard and slashes her leg. When the killer lowers her defenses, the determined woman stabs her neck, ending her life. Moments later, Greg finally regains consciousness, crawls towards his wife, and makes sure she's okay.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.